Welcome back to the Renewables podcast. You will notice we're in a different environment again with a new guest. Before we speak to Jason, I want to go to Sam and ask how you're doing, mate.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, raced over here, got over here, nice and safe, and very much looking forward to this one. Really looking forward to being in the presence of GivEnergy.
Absolutely. And the CEO, global CEO of GivEnergy, Jason Howlett. So how are you doing, Jason?
I'm good. Yeah, good to see you both. Thank you for coming over. That's really appreciated you spending time and taking time out your day to come over here and see us.
I've primarily brought Sam so we can sign him up as an installer. It's going straight through.
I knew this was going to be it.
I knew this was
You out. We're not letting you out. We've got the training lined up, everything geared up, ready for you.
Oh, I tell you what, the all-in-ones look very good. They've been the ones that have really nearly tempted me over. So yeah, they're very, very good.
The product. We've got a wide range of discussions to have with you, Jason, but before we get into some of the topics that I want to talk about, let's touch on some of the equipment. And the all-in-one is the kind of one most people are maybe familiar with, certainly at a consumer level. We've installed loads of them. Has that been a big driver to the growth in the UK behind what you guys are up to?
Yeah, I think the range of products, we've the all-in-one, we would, without letting out too many secrets, we've tried to emulate probably some, high-class products that are out there on the market, slightly outdo what was on the market at the time and technically be superior, but also think about the installer and make it an easier product to install by making it more the modular process. So, but I think it's trying to listen to installers, trying to really focus on hardware, but also software, and listen to the challenges we've had with commissioning and support. So there's been a multiple factors, but the all-in-one is great. I've got one at home, two at home, I should say. So it's one of those questions people go, can you put more than one in? Yeah, of course. I've got two at home. So, but yeah, it is a brilliant product. It's pretty much bomb-proof in terms of its design. It genuinely is. It's been a fantastic product we've got, and we launched it at the show. I think you saw it, the new hybrid option that's going to be coming probably Q1 next year, and I think that just adds on it the constant evolution. We've got probably 150 people in R&D, both here and in China, in our factory in China, working on constant R&D all the time. We've got some really cute ideas of new things that we can develop and new topology and everything. So it's that constant drive to bring new products to the market, to bring better products to the market, to bring more accessible products to the market. So there's a multitude of factors that come into it.
Just to interject today's show, we want to speak to you about another awesome product from Proteus, and that is the Type B RCBO that they've just brought out, Sam. We saw that in person on the podcast we did with Proteus, and again, it's helping us as installers, isn't it?
Oh, it's unbelievable how they have managed to engineer it, to fit it all within a single module. I remember fitting the ones that are about 3 or 4 modules wide. How they've managed to engineer that into one module is an absolute... I don't know how they've done it, but it's fantastic that they have.
They have, and it's bi-directional as well. So again, thinking of us as installers for those PV and EV systems. And that is why we are so proud and honoured to be sponsored by Proteus on the Renewables podcast. But let's get back to the show.
Yeah, I mean, you've been at GivEnergy now just over 2 years, and I think it's fair to say your role is maybe more the business growth side of it. Is that what you're doing day to day? So less of the technology and more of getting GivEnergy out there worldwide.
Yeah. I'm not a tech geek, so when people start looking at me as though you should know, I'm like, no, I'm a business person.
I'm going to record technical question.
Yeah, no, please, no. Yeah, I'll embarrass myself. No, and I was brought in really to help scale the business. So the GivEnergy, the journey of GivEnergy, we were, as a brand, if you like, created in 2017 because the factory we have in China was making products for other people. And basically the founder of the company was challenged, going, that's great, making it for others, you can't do it yourself. And the person he is took it upon himself to go, I will. So started selling that. In 2018, we created the company of GivEnergy because it was starting to sell. So GivEnergy UK was then created. And so in terms of, we've got products our factories made out there for like 15 years. So in our industry, we're actually quite mature, one of probably the longest standing. You think of a lot of companies that have sprung up in the last few years into this space. So, we've been around, but when I joined 2 years ago, it was really, we had 2 companies, GivEnergy and GivEducation, which we can talk about later. But it was we've got a great, and I came from distribution, so I was selling most of the products. I was at Seagen as the managing director there. So I was buying and selling most of the products, and what GivEnergy had I felt was really unique in many aspects, and was really onto a winner, because it is as much about the software it is about the hardware. So the founder, he encouraged me to join. I played hard to get for a little while, but he eventually still negotiating. Hope he's not listening. But no, we came to reach a conclusion, and it was really to then scale. And I worked across Europe in previous business across many parts of the world. So it was really to then look at how we expand. And I think we're now about 15 companies in the group. So we're present. So we've got GivEnergy Europe, which is both based in the Netherlands and Romania. We've got GivEnergy Australia, which is based in Adelaide and Melbourne. We're in GivEnergy Africa, based in Joburg. Asia, which is Singapore. And then also we've got the manufacturing, which again is our factory. And many people say, but who makes your product? Like, we do. It's literally us. We don't make product for anyone else. We stopped making products for other people. So we've got that facility. And then all our operations here in the UK, which is our global software team, is here on the floor below us. We've built a new factory just down the road, which assembles our commercial. You get into this debate, manufactured in the UK. Well, technically it's manufactured, but it's assembled. Let's be clear. And we see many people have that debate. But we take our core components from the factory, put them into shipping containers, put fire protection in there if people want it, the ventilation. We clad it out and insulate those, make it to entirely the spec of what people are looking for. So we've expanded massively into the whole range of different things, and made a couple of acquisitions along the way. Got a couple more acquisitions underway. So my inbox is...
It's Orange Power that you've just got through. That's not that long ago, is it?
No, we managed to complete that one about 2-3 weeks ago. That one came a little bit opportunistic to us. We actually have a joke, and we have to slow down a little bit. If we don't buy something, build something, create something every month, we're slowing down. So we've been buying land and assets that's building. We bought this head office where we are, the building next door, you can see out the window. We bought that one last year. We bought some land to develop a tech park in there. But yeah, Orange Power really is that niche of where we can see the market now going, and you see the need for grid services. There's a huge demand for what energy storage can do. So long gone are the days of using a battery to store your renewable energy. The traditional thing was you maximize your self-generation. That's it. So, you guys know that you put solar on a roof, you probably 30-40% you utilize of the energy, utilize that energy. Put a battery on, you probably up to 80%. Now with the tariffs that are available, with the services that are available, and the need to really support the grid, people are more and more looking at getting a return on their investment through supporting the grid and doing great things. And sometimes, and including my own tariff system, it's actually better value for me to export all my renewables and buy energy at night. So I don't want to maximize my self-consumption now. I want to buy the energy at the cheapest point off the grid and export my energy at the best possible price. So we almost become mini traders, don't we? And this is what Orange Power is doing. There's a real gap, in particular in commercial systems, of operating these grid services and really accessing those for small, medium businesses in particular. You're not talking about utility scale; they've got it nailed. But the frequency response, demand side reduction, balancing mechanisms, there's huge actual value add. But actually, it's also critical to support the national grid.
But this is it. If you look at the grid and the investment that the government and the national grid are saying they want in that, it's huge. Those figures are ginormous. And there's maybe things we can do at a much smaller scale to reduce that kind of capital expenditure in those places. And battery storage is a big one of them. It also gives energy freedom to individual consumers. I think that's another discussion around energy poverty. I think it's about 5 or 6 million people actually in energy poverty or households in the UK, which is staggering. I find that a staggering number when you step back and look at that.
Oh, it's crazy. And actually, the whole thing about energy storage, I've also said, the historical element of the generation matching demand. That classic halftime at a big football match, the adverts in Crossroads going back, Crossroads, where did that come
Crossroads,
from?
that's
Coronation
the
Street. Wow, my God, I'm really showing how Coronation Street, something like that. But you see that, and there was that spike in demand. But now we're actually finding we've got to better match generation to demand, and the best way of doing that is to store that. And it can be storage in heat, it can be storage in your vehicle, it can be storage in your home battery, or even hydrogen. So you think of that whole storage mechanism and how you store energy to better match the generation. So this is where really batteries and storage comes into its own, because we're now into a space, and we see this particularly in Australia right now. There's too much generation, and New South Wales are introducing next year a solar tax. So if you want to push energy into the grid at peak time, you'll be penalised. You won't get paid. You'll be charged to put your energy into the grid because they've got now too much. So there's now an incentive coming in, takes effect 1st of November, to encourage people to retrofit storage, because there's been this massive push, and we see this in other parts of the world. We need renewables. You've got to have a joined up energy policy and energy thinking to go, yes, we need smart energy systems and take the pressure off the grid, because we know our grid is up and down, the demands on the grid every day and night. If we can smooth that out, you don't need that massive infrastructure. And I spoke to Desnes some months back, actually, with the previous government, and they were trying to model this and say, well, if you invest in storage, not in grid infrastructure, you can save millions, not billions, on putting bigger wires in the air or in the ground. Just store it.
It's so interesting reflecting on the journey of solar, because we were chatting in an email, I think it's IET this week, about some other stuff, but it prompted me to kind of reflect on where solar started for reaping basically a reward from the feed-in tariff. Just generate it, we'll pay you. You don't have to really think about it much more than that. And then the next phase came self-consumption, where people were like, okay, well, the tariff isn't around anymore. I'm going to generate power. I'm going to store it in a battery, and I'm going to get an immediate benefit from that because I'm increasing the amount of my solar power that has been generated whilst I'm at work into my house. The next step is where I see us at now, which is doing all of that, but also now playing the tariffs and forcing export. I'm the same at my house. My battery forces export back to the grid on a night time, and I try and get as much of my solar back to the grid because it's better for me to discharge it to the grid and buy the power in overnight.
Yep.
And then I feel like the next stage 4, is exactly what you just mentioned there, which is demand side response. It's supporting the infrastructure that we've got whilst also playing the tariffs, but probably bringing in things like vehicle to grid, vehicle to home, and really doubling down on that support for the network. Hopefully customers and businesses that do that will be fairly reimbursed for their investment. But I feel like that's the next step that we're going to. And it's really exciting to hear you talk about that in your vision as well, because it just seems like there's going to be so much more potential unlocked for homeowners that want to invest in this. It's kind of like, yes, you're saving some money and what have you through using your generation, but you're also unlocking this whole other part of the country's infrastructure that if you don't have solar and battery, mainly battery, you're just never going to get a chance to actually be a part of. So you're kind of missing out.
And you see this, we saw it last winter. People go, oh, it was when on the cold days, my battery's not charging. It had gone below that point and then discharged because they weren't actually using their battery to charge up overnight. So people who've had historic energy storage have been left with a system that's now, the market shifted, the dynamics have shifted. But we've got to raise awareness actually with homeowners to go, use your battery differently now than you did. We're all a bit geeky with batteries. You technically, me on the more of the business side, but you know what I'm saying? We kind of understand it. We know how to best use it. But there's so many people who've been left with a system that is now suboptimal. How do we raise awareness to go, guys, use your battery to charge up overnight? There are cheap tariffs available. Don't just now use to maximise your self-generation, particularly in winter when you get very poor generation. We all know. So charge it up during the night, cheap electricity, keeps your battery healthy and keeps it available.
Do you think companies like GivEnergy are going to, and you're probably in the best place to answer this, but are going to be more involved with that process with end users through things like AI, AI and you know, AI solves everything. It seems at the minute.
It's the buzzword, isn't
Yeah,
it?
it is.
It's
But
if it's
using
not AI,
that,
it's not.
that's it. But using that sort of technology to basically take that stress away from people that maybe aren't as geeky, but just want it to be maximised.
Absolutely. And we've never actually broadcast it, but we have with the forecasting tools and everything. We've had AI for years, you know, and we just don't actually talk about it because it's, you know, it's the forecasting activity and there. So we've got a new homeowner app coming. We've got the new installer app that has been launched in beta, but you know the team downstairs are busily working. There's some, you know, tremendous stuff, but we've already got that now. So you create the winter setting, at least starts to charge, to make that as easy as possible for the homeowner to get the best system. So what is it you want to achieve? Do you want to achieve the greenest energy? If you're a real eco warrior, you want the greenest energy from the grid. That setting, press that setting, get the greenest energy. If you want the cheapest, which let's face it, most people want, we might all be think about the environment, but if I can save an extra couple of quid, I'd rather save a couple of quid and be pretty green. I can accept not being perfect. I can accept being pretty good and save a couple of extra quid a day on my energy. So it's that on the energy costing that you use. So it's that, moving to that next level, which is what we're developing through the team downstairs. It's that next level of, with the grid services, making this as accessible to homeowners, because fundamentally that's what you've got to do. If we're genuinely trying to not just sell a box, and that's not our mentality, it's trying to sell the solution to maximize, and that changes. Like I say, you touched on it there, Sam. It's when people invested 10 years ago, feed-in tariffs were just about getting the maximum off there. We don't even think about a battery. We don't want that. We're getting 40 pence to export our energy to the grid. Now, we want to use it differently. 2 years ago, we were using it differently. We want self-generation, but the rates weren't because they weren't there. We changed our operation of our batteries in the last year or so because the situation's changed. But if you're not aware of it, and you are a homeowner who just wants the best value, you've been sold the asset on what was there, but there's better things now. Utilise your batteries for grid services, get it accessible to more, make more money from your battery, make it work harder for you, and get more money from and lower your energy bills at the same time.
Massive education piece, I think, for existing users and also people who haven't got battery technology. I speak to so many people who've got no idea about it. It's like it doesn't exist, and I find that stunning. Been in the industry, everyone knows about this stuff.
Yeah.
But it's amazing how many people just are happy with their existing energy supplier, buying their energy, they're not even thinking about it. So I don't know if that's something that the trade associations need to do, or it's a government issue, or whatever. But if we're really looking at this as the net zero and trying to impact that, we need to get millions of households on board with this. That's the key to the balance, the financial barriers and all the rest of it. But I do think a lot of it is education and awareness.
And people still think of a battery with solar. And again, you don't need solar to make the best out of a battery. You know, we've got case studies that show a battery payback is probably 3 to 4 years, whereas solar is probably 7 to 8. And combined, you're probably looking at 5 to 6. You know, put a battery on, it's actually the most cost-effective solution because you instantly access the cheap overnight electricity. So forget about your own self-generation. But if you can power your house, your business or anything from electricity at 7 to 8, 10p a kilowatt hour, rather than paying 30 pence per kilowatt hour, you can reduce your bill by at least, two-thirds. So forget the renewable. And this is where I think storage doesn't actually have enough of its own voice. And it's all forms of storage. I'm not just talking batteries here. It's the long term. I've worked in hydro, pumped hydro previously. I've worked in batteries and other areas. But you think of all those heat storage is great. Even hydrogen, like I talked about before. If you've got excess solar, why we're not using that to generate hydrogen or renewables? So you think of all of those things and play it there. That you think it works on its own, and every house should have the technology to access the cheapest electricity and be automated, that the homeowner doesn't have to think about it. The smarter we make the tech, and this is going to be required. You touched on it already, Sam. Is the next iteration is going to be you have less interaction with your battery. It will just operate to the optimum for you.
Yeah.
It'll just work. You don't have to think about it. Tariffs have changed. Something's changed. It'll just work best for you. And the grid will have more interaction with your battery than you will.
I think that's going to be the key, I think, to unlocking it. Because you mentioned, Mark, obviously people don't necessarily know about it. It feels strange when you're in this industry and you feel like you're talking to hundreds of people every month about it. But there's a lot of people out there that have no idea about it, are kind of scared of the technology a little bit in terms of what they have to do to control it, what they've got to do to, keep it maintained. Are they going to do something to break it? But I think if the function is there where you go, no, all you've got to do is have it installed, set it up with your installer. After that, it will look after itself. I think that is people are kind of like, all right, so it's just like a smart fridge, or it's just another gadget in the house, rather than it being something that you have to test like a lead acid battery and do the dip tests on. It's not. The world has changed from that now, and I think as we move down that path of automating that stuff through AI and through support from companies like yourselves to end customers, then that makes that conversation for us installers so much easier. Kind of go, no, we'll look after that, and it'll look after itself.
It's one of those where it needs to become like an electricity supply to a house, a gas supply, traditionally water supply. That houses have solar battery storage as part of them, especially in new build stuff that's going up fresh out of the box today. The amount of estates you see where they've not even considered it. It's not there, and if it is, it's 2 to 4 panels or something.
Yeah.
That seems daft when we can legislate in building regulations to try and solve that problem. And a lot of it kind of seems to trace back to government. That's, as an installer looking, I have no interaction or conversation with anyone in the government of things around stuff like this. I imagine you probably do, Jason. And when you're dealing with one political entity one year and another one next year, how do you forecast and plan? You've been through it, Sam, with the feed-in tariff, where government started that and then stopped it.
Yeah.
They have a massive impact on all of this. I was reading a paper the other week to do with housing as well. I think France have a similar population to us. They've got something like 7 million more houses that they've built in their country. We seem to have a real problem with planning and building in the UK. And I feel like that's impacting on the renewables world as well. Do you see that? GivEnergy.
Yeah, I do, and it's really interesting, Mark. I've had these conversations with government before. Government will never set the standard. They're always in arrears because they're not. Government's slow. Anywhere in the world, I've interacted with governments around the world, and they're all facing that same challenge. They want to do more in renewables and how to do it, but they're all looking for who can take the lead. The actual Australian roadmap to renewables is actually a really good roadmap. I actually sent it to Ed Miliband when it came out. It's like, you need to look at this. It's like, didn't reply, but he has been here. So we do have good relations. I have good relations with them, but I don't think government will ever be able to set a standard. And we've kind of seen it even when people try to catch up with standards. And create guidance like we've seen with PES 63100 and BSI, which created quite a controversy. It was out of date when they published it because they're still thinking old battery technologies, old situations, and even with some of the things that were in there. We'll not turn it into a debate. This would take over the whole podcast now if we want to pass 63100. But it was out of date when it was created, and so they're going to be in catch up into doing some of these things. So we've, as industry, and we see this and trying to work with some of the energy companies to create the standards ahead that government can adopt and utilise what's going on around the world and keep abreast of that. Because, like we talked about with future home standards, every house should have a battery and solar and renewables as a whole, as a standard. That should be it. But we're still having this debate over what level of this and the energy efficiency. Just make it happen. We've seen with things that are happening with developers who do invest in it, and there are 1 or 2 developers, and you've seen Octopus with Zero Bills Homes and all these things. Consumer actually wants it, and the consumer is really interested in this because you've got something that lowers their utility costs, lowers their bills, which is what they're really interested in, is green, and most people are aware of the environment so much more than they were 20 years ago. So there is that demand there, and I think it's almost industry has to create the standards, and industry has to push this along for government to keep up, because I don't think we can ever expect governments to do it. And I am really supportive of this current government. I think they are so much greener. GivEnergy, I think, is a great concept. We still need to see more of what's going to come out of it. But the aspirations, what they have in this government, I fully support and fully endorse. But we can't wait for them. We'll be forever waiting, and it'll be wrong when they produce it because it'll be out of date. So how do we keep working, pushing the standards, pushing the grid standards, pushing National Grid and the new ESO, which I'm so pleased has been bought by the government, And because one of the big frustrations I hear from developers and installers is getting grid connections and all these sort of things. We've got to free this logjam off, and that's what government can help with. But if we think about standards, we've got to drive that as an industry, as manufacturers, as installers, all working together and go, right, how do we raise the standards for what's needed?
I just wondered if they were encouraging you in terms, I mean, you said about your product being in China, manufacturing in the UK in a bigger way than you maybe currently do. Is there the kind of government support schemes there to enable that, or is that something that they're not currently looking at? You know, I think there's a big thirst to do more in our own country. You know, I don't think there's anything wrong with having stuff manufactured abroad and imported. If it can be done to the standard that's needed, you know, stuff gets made everywhere, doesn't it? Because it doesn't matter, but we should be looking to try and do that here if we can. Do you see that support from government?
So yeah, there's a real. I actually talk about this. It's a bit of a beauty parade going out there at the minute, because every country I interact with, every government will go, well, will you manufacture here? Everyone says, you know, they want to create green jobs, clean tech. So the UK is actually competing with governments around the world to get manufacturing in here. And again, I've raised this point with Johnny Reynolds. And so it's not that, you know, they're just on their own. And actually, the really weird, perverse thing is that the government almost competes with itself. So I can be talking in Romania, you know, and the British embassy in Romania will be encouraging me to work with the Romanian government to do manufacturing in Romania. I can talk to the South African High Commission, the British High Commission in South Africa, and they'll be going, have you thought about manufacturing in South Africa? We can help you work with the South African government. And then you talk to the business and trade team and Desnes here, and they'll be like, yeah, we want to do more in that space, and we'd like to do more. But, you know, there are massive grants being offered by some European and governments around the world to really incentivize this, and you know, offering up to 75% grants. So if you think of, if you want to build a manufacturing facility in the UK, and we are in conversations about that right now, but from the heart, we want to do more in the UK. We're a UK business. We want to manufacture. We need to manufacture in more than one location. We've grown so much that we both need to increase capacity, but also we don't want to just be manufacturing in one continent, wherever that would be, because you've got to have you know, widen your and de-risk for any sorts of reasons. You know, we've seen COVID, we've seen Suez Canal blocked, we see all sorts of tensions, geopolitical tensions going on. So you think of, how do we de-risk ourselves? So we want to start and manufacture more in Europe, ideally in the UK, ideally here in North Staffordshire, in the Stoke-on-Trent, Newcastle-under-Lyme area. But actually, it's like, well, from the heart, we want to do it here, but in the head, you go, why would we do it here when I'm being offered a grant in Eastern Europe to build a factory with 3/4 of that subsidised by the government, so the in-country government. So it's a real challenge at the minute. I'm optimistic. One of my meetings before we guys met up was with one of the local councils here about how that can work, putting something to government. That'll be probably a 2-3 year plan. So we will keep exploring it, because, like I say, from the heart, we want to do it here. We're a British company. We'd love to manufacture here and bring manufacturing into the UK, because we're British.
Yeah, I think that's what, from what I've seen of the new government, they're really wanting to try and encourage. And it's really interesting to hear that they kind of compete with each other, with itself in different countries, to try and bring that manufacturing to that country that you're in, like say Romania or wherever. But yeah, do you think the government moves too slow, no matter if it's Labour or if it's Conservative? Do you think it actually just moves too slow, instead of just going, people are going to be annoyed about this, you know, and others are going to be really happy, let's just do it and see what happens and just take that risk?
Yeah, I think there's just so many conflicting priorities as well, aren't there? That's the problem. You know, if you said, right, what do you want government to do today? And, you know, that's 100 people in the street. I'm not sure building green technology and factories it would even feature. No. Yeah, it's like Family Fortunes, your top 5 answers are. That is it. So we are competing. You know, there's not enough prisons right now. I mean, your prison spaces, and you see that. So you go, well, how do we fit into that space? So I know there's an aspiration, and this is actually what I actually said to John Reynolds. You know, at some point we're going to have to be realistic and go, can the country afford to compete in this space right now or not? Because we need to think about it. But because if we do, then we do. But if we can't afford to compete right now because of conflicting priorities and what the country needs, even more importantly than than green manufacturing and green capability, we might have to have that grown-up conversation. We can't afford to do it.
I think that's building policy consensus, isn't it? Because like you've said, Sam, I don't think anyone's going to come and say, here's 10 billion quid or whatever, go and build batteries in the UK and we'll do it all ourselves. That's never going to happen. But if you can build consensus and policy through different iterations of government, maybe over a decade, you might get that shift that you need. Because we need to factor in that a lot of people who would like battery storage maybe aren't even aware of it, can't afford it. So there's that kind of hurdle. Do we change that investment in the grid to help support those people with grants or discounts in their energy bills to enable access to battery storage? However that looks, you need consensus across political parties, I think, to get a change like that. And that's really hard to make happen.
I think as well with that though, and I feel like this has been a bit of a change in politics over the past while now, but it feels like it sounds a bit strange that every government wants the public to be massively involved with every decision, whereas actually you are electing that MP to make decisions based on everything in there. So kind of like leave us out of it. We've elected you to do the right thing and be held to those decisions you make. And if that decision is yes, because we're going to build a new battery factory just down the road here, because over the next 10 years it's going to be better for this country, then stand by that decision and explain why it is. But don't go, what would you like? Because everyone's going to say better NHS, better this, better that, lower bills. You are the MP to actually.
That's what the manifesto's there for, isn't it? In the end of the day, and no party ever comes with a perfect manifesto for any individual. So you're always picking the manifesto that closest matches what you want from your life. But that's what, if the government stick to their manifestos and go, right, this is what we believe in, this is what we're going to do. Like, so I completely agree. It's like, don't then go back and go, what do you think, and everything else.
We won't turn it into a political podcast. No. If you look
let's do it.
if you look at some of the things that have gone through various governments, you've got HS2, and there's a tunnel they've been trying to build under the Thames for years. I think they spent £300 million on planning and messing about with it to try and cover off the Blackwall Tunnel and Queen Elizabeth Bridge or whatever. They want another crossing. £300 million just spent talking about it through different iterations of Labour and Conservative governments. You just think that's a whole other level of massive waste.
We can waste so much money, can't we?
It's just it's scary when you look at it at that level. But pulling it back to our conversation, and you mentioned about the software. I know you're very big on that, and that's kind of what, for me, looking at it as an installer, that's mainly what GivEnergy is. The hardware is brilliant, but the app and the software and its UK control, I think, is really important. One of the concerns I have as an installer now, as we're building our database of customers, is the responsibility of that data and security of it. With my team, I'm quite happy that they're a tight unit and no one's going to do any of these rogue things. But I'm thinking of bigger installers out there who could have thousands of systems. They could be hacked. That could be force discharged across thousands of consumers all at once, potentially damaging the grid. And obviously with GivEnergy, you've got that on a much bigger scale. Is that something that you're worried about?
Yeah, it's a huge thing. We've just taken on another security person in the team as well. The great thing, we don't outsource any software. That's the key thing, and where we've worked in partnerships, we're bringing that, like the Orange acquisition is key to, again, us working in there, and we the whole ethos of the company was built with open API, but that's encrypted API, and we had a security breach. We published it, and this is one of the actual, again, one of the real interesting things, because we were operating on a chip encryption that was not up to the latest standard. So we got an ethical hacker who hacked in. We made a public statement about it. We fixed it within 2 hours, I think it was, might have been 3, which when we went back to the hacker, we fixed it and sorted it. They were blown away, in the fact, because the team just dropped everything, now works on that. So we've worked that, and we do offer a bounty to anyone who can hack into us, because we want people to work with us and keep testing us. And this hacker's still trying to break into us and can't anymore. So I'm really pleased by that. They do have our system as well on the back of it, because they saw the responsiveness and how we worked and do it. I know of 2 other companies that have that same issue. Don't know if they fixed it or not, but I know that won't get publicised. That won't get published, because they're not a British company, they're not operating to GDPR standards. We have to declare that and work it, and we fixed it. So we're constantly testing ourselves. We're going through ISO 27001, and the cyber assessment framework, which we believe the government should introduce in this space. So there's it's a government policy legislation for critical infrastructure called CAF, and then CAF extended. We believe all assets should be, and so we're operating to that standard and going through the audits to get to that highest level of security and system security, because there's two aspects here that we are lobbying hard over, and you've seen the head of MI5 in his latest security State of the Nation update 2 or 3 weeks ago, talking about data gathering from foreign states who are busily mining data. And if you think about your energy data, and I've talked about this to a few people, but if you have a battery and inverter, I actually can track your data. So if I look into your system, I actually I can profile your life as one aspect. If I've got multiple aspects of data gathering, I understand what's happening with you and then society as a whole. So you think it's really actually powerful, because when we wake up, we'll switch a light on, we'll start to consume energy. Your energy profile will rise. You put the kettle on, it goes up even more. You leave the house, it drops. So then you get back at home. I know roughly what time some people are getting back into the house. It goes back up again. And as you track that data and everything, I actually build a profile of your life through your energy fingerprint. And it's a really scary prospect when you think about it. If people have that power, but you combine that with multiple data points, not just your energy, but everything else. So there's huge data gathering going on, and the MI5 talked about this. But it's, where do you want that data to be? Now, GivEnergy, we only have our data in UK-based servers. So we fully comply to GDPR legislation. And I've seen some other manufacturers talk about, our data's stored here and everything else. But it transitions through China. Most products made in China, let's face it, ours is made in China. But we're the only ones that completely separate hardware and software. So we talk about dumb hardware manufactured in China, intelligence all given here in this building. So it's really, really important for consumers to understand. And we see this, it's almost mis-selling going on within certain bigger companies, that you don't get a choice. If you engage with a big company, right, we'll come and fit you a system, Mr. and Mrs. Jones. Goes in. What is it? Well, it's ex-Chinese brand. Okay, that's right. You're not told that your data's now gone to and is in China and is accessible to China. And this is the state, and there's been numerous papers produced in the EU about GDPR and data, because within China, the state is the law. So Chinese companies, and you saw this with Huawei, you have to provide, if requested, your data to the party. So the state, it's a massive challenge and an area, but you bring that back into cyber security. And this was also mentioned, the grid security. We're talking about VPPs, the virtual power plants, where the batteries come together for good. We had an incident recently, the interconnector dropped out, the grid frequency dropped, batteries were required instantly to push energy back into grid, stabilize the grid. Brilliant, real positive action for these systems. But what if somebody else controls that? And again, this comes back into one of the things I'm very, very passionate about, raising that awareness, because we have to think, and governments around the world, and again, Australia is probably leading in this space, that cyber threat of nations controlling key assets on our grid. And I had a conversation with a developer some months ago when I was, just by chance, I was in London on a way to meet Claire Coutinho for a private meeting, but I met a developer just before, and they said they'd just done a 40 megawatt hour system. And it's like, so we were talking about our commercial systems, trying to do a deal and things. And I said, how much did you pay? And he told me the price. I was like, wow, that's good. I said, we'd struggle to actually manufacture it at the price you got it. He says, whose system? He told me the name of the manufacturer. I was like, well, that's a brand. It was a panel manufacturer's brand. I said, so I know they're not even making it, so they've got their profit on. But I said, I do know who makes it, because it's a small industry in many ways. I said, and they're 40% state-owned. I said, so why would a state-owned or influenced manufacturer be subsidising something on the grid? And you could see his eyes wide open. And this is the challenge we have. We're capitalists. Everyone wants the lowest cost, the best return on investment. Well, if somebody's subsidising that and you put a big system in and you go, well, the payback's 4 years. Let's see, if I buy this system, I can pay back in 2-3 years and I'm making more money. Then we become the product in this state. So, this is a real challenge of having the correct standards and really pushing people to and governments. And we've been liaising with DESNZ and they are starting to get to grips with this. And we've been consulting on a number of cyber security areas. So I think they're starting to get it, but not quick enough in my mind. And how do you protect the grid, but protect the individual consumer? And that's why I say we are different. And really why we invest so much in our software and the software team. And we genuinely do not compromise anybody's data. It's all held here fully under GDPR legislation.
Do you think that's not necessarily seen as much out in the industry because our kind of culture is so much different to, you mentioned China, and obviously everything kind of being, the data can be requested by the state. Obviously, it's such a different world to what we have that it kind of just doesn't even feature in our minds. No. But over there, it's obviously a different culture, rightly or wrongly. I'm not here to judge, but that is a different culture that is then, they must look at us and go, well, there's this opportunity there to just collect data for reasons that might be good, might be malicious, who knows, and those might change. And so I think it's certainly not something I'd given a huge amount of thought to, because you kind of put your trust in the manufacturers of the equipment to be complying to that. But we fall into those traps sometimes, and that's give me some stuff to think about.
We're definitely relying on the manufacturers there. I think as installers, that's we're buying this stuff has been warranted and manufactured to a set standard in terms of safety. But there's a bigger story there, I think, to do with all the software side of things. You've got people maybe been hacked at a local level. I'm thinking of an individual consumer where somebody could maliciously gain access to an inverter through its internet connection into that home and maybe start doing banking fraud, or even to the point of messing about with their power or whatever. There's those kind of things. But on a national scale, as you've just alluded to there, Jason, if a rogue agent from foreign territories decides to all of a sudden discharge every battery storage system in the UK, that could take communications infrastructure out, it could affect transport, and you just don't know if that's something that could be a thing in the future. I don't think it is a thing right now, but fast forward 5-10 years, would someone want to do that to us? We had the thing in with Hezbollah and the explosive walkie-talkies and stuff. No one thought that would be a thing, and it happened. This could be a thing we need to be covering off.
Absolutely, I think this is one of the big challenges that we sort of talk about. It's like at that point, I think we're almost at that point. We could make an impact on the grid. GivEnergy has enough assets out there that we could, I think, create an event on the grid. So if we can do it, we're not. I've joked off. Semi-jokes was like, well, let's do it to prove we can do it. Like, that's a bit wrong, isn't it? Yeah, we've probably
got you on tape now.
But to prove it can happen and you destabilize. Like I say, there was an event on the grid, we corrected it. So if we can correct it, we can destabilize it in the first place, and one of those aspects. So it's quite a scary scenario because everything relies on electricity now. The internet, banking. Can't go to a card machine, get some cash out. I was in a coffee shop. I'll not name it just to avoid. But I was in a coffee shop recently, and I managed to get a coffee. And I was sat there. Tills went down. People coming up and say, "Can I get a coffee?" "Oh no, sorry, tills are down." "I've got cash. I can pay." "No, we can't take cash." It's like until the tills are there because it all has to go through. It's like, well, can you take cash now and book it through? "No, I can't do it." So people are like, "I can't even get coffee," because the tills were down. But like I say, you can't get food from a supermarket or anything because it's all credit cards and everything's automated. So you think of how long would it actually take for anarchy to prevail in cities, particularly 1 or 2 days before everything goes self-destruction can actually happen without the fabrics, and that's kind of what MI5 was starting to allude to. So I don't even think they talked about energy security and grid security in their statement. You'll look at it, but it's way down in that list. But it's something we have to, and like I say, I do see the Australians are a little bit more advanced in this space, and we do need to catch up fast because it's really, really important. And it is those standards that we just apply to and protections that we have.
So on the standards side of things, because one thing that we're seeing now, there's this bit of a boom again in solar and battery, and there's a lot more new companies coming out, both in the installer side of things and on the manufacturing side of things. I often get frustrated that, potentially installers aren't working on an even baseline. So for me, I'm very passionate about backing the PAS document, and so I get frustrated when I see people not kind of try to raise the standards, even just of the security and like fire security of that home, regardless of the battery storage system. But you guys must get frustrated when you're doing all of this work towards the cyber side of things, and you know for a fact that many others aren't putting that investment in, but are claiming to be doing the same thing. So do you think there needs to be, and you've kind of already alluded to this, I suppose, but do you think there needs to be a real clear guideline as to what has to happen? None of this kind of hairy-fairy, you can get around it this way. You need to have the servers and everything managed in the UK to meet that GDPR. It cannot go external to that.
And it's,
Job done.
yeah, and remember, just a point, Sam, it's not just data in here, it's data in transit, data at rest. So you have two
Right.
sets of data. So what's that journey? Because I've seen people claiming, all your data's held in Europe, but it's only a copy of the data. So yes, that's strictly true, but it's not the only version of your data that's in Europe. And this is one of the things, because the transitioning point and how that is, all the data only transitions here to the UK.
Right.
On there, so that's a real aspect. But it is, we're investing it because we believe in it. It's the right thing to do. We believe that's where this will be in 2-3 years' time. We're spending significant amount of money. I've probably recruited more software security people. One of the guys we've got used to work on the F-15 fighter jet with protecting its security from hackers. So it's at that level of that we've been able to recruit to really drive those levels up, because it's got to come. There is no other way of thinking about it from multiple angles. So for us, it's the only way to be, and it's one of our differentiators. Let's face it as well. So yes, it incurs more cost into that, but fundamentally, it's got to go that way for us.
Yeah.
And if we're wrong, then we've wasted some money.
Yeah, I was just...
But I still think it's the right thing, morally.
I think it definitely is. If you look at the grid infrastructure as it was with coal power stations, you'd have a few dotted around the country. It's really hard to gain control of those, even in the world of software and hacking, because they can...
We're all integrated together.
Yeah, it's really difficult. But if you've got many thousands of these systems, if you could get control of one manufacturer's, there's a risk there, and it may take a while to get that control back. So there's definitely a thing there that needs to be sorted out, and I guess that falls back into the government wheelhouse of things. And it's just awareness of consumers. I think when they're doing their research in selecting a manufacturer, there's more than just what can it output, what's its battery storage capacity, what's its price tag, and look at this stuff with a value. I think that's at the minute, I don't have those conversations with my customers. They're totally unaware of that. There's a few who are a little bit funny about their data and such, but it's not really a big discussion point. I don't know about you, Sam.
I don't think I've ever been asked it. And that's what's worrying, is that if a consumer has never been asked it, it means that I'm never raising it to companies like GivEnergy, which means that many companies that are finding those workarounds, that are complying with the law, I assume, but that aren't maybe doing it as morally correct as, what you've just outlined there. There's no real drive for that to change unless people are asking for it and pushing for it.
And the framework's there, like I say, the cyber assessment framework, CAF, but it just doesn't cover this sector. So we're again lobbying hard that it should. So the government's got it with critical infrastructure. This needs to be considered, particularly at grid scale. Thousands of domestic, that's fine. But you think of utility scale assets, you don't need many of those to start creating it. But again, the more fragmented you have storage, and this comes back into why every home should have it, the benefits are so vast that But again, as long as you've got the controls and the protocols in there to protect against rogue agents.
So this is the morning after the night before, and I'm back at HQ editing up the content. And we're breaking this one apart into a couple of episodes again, primarily because we want to really avoid these 2-hour-long episodes that I think people tune out from. So we're going to come back again with Jason next week, where we continue our conversation into the world of PAS, more on cybersecurity, GivEducation, and exciting new products that GivEnergy have got launching in the first part of 2025. It's
quite fitting, I think, that back here I can show you the Polar ESS that we've got at the Apprentice One-to-One training space. And that was kindly provided to us by GivEnergy to use as a resource for those people learning to become electricians. And it's another example of the awesomeness of that brand, and while I am a very, very happy installer. But if you don't want to miss the rest of the chat, make sure you do subscribe to the channel. We're seeing some really cool growth with things now. We're getting lots of downloads and listens, which is fantastic. Loads of brands wanting to come on, so we've got lots of conversations at those levels. And we're going to really try and drill into some of the grid and infrastructure side of things as well with people from those spaces. So please do subscribe, continue to show your support. Myself and Sam are really grateful, and drop back next week to see the conclusion of our chat with Jason of GivEnergy.